Hello everyone and welcome to this week's edition of a late night screen review. This time we're talking about The Exorcist. Better believe it.
Don't be scared.
We've met before.
Are you looking for Reagan?
Are you looking for Reagan?
She runs in
What do you think evil is? I'll tell you what I think it is. We're born in this world with hope and dreams and a desire to be happy.
Dad?
Something's going on with my daughter.
It's happening to my daughter, too.
The devil has one wish,
Wherever those girls went, they brought something back with them.
to make us lose faith,
But I believe you can help get our daughters back.
to kill it in us. And the devil never gives up.
So this movie tells the story of Victor Fielding, who's a single father after his pregnant wife, dies when they're on a holiday in Haiti. Obviously, his wife gives birth, or they get the baby somehow afterwards, and his daughter, who is Angela, grows up. She's a young teenager, high schooler in America, with her best friend Catherine. Without telling their parents, they sneak off one day after school and go into the woods to perform a ceremony to try and to speak to Angela's long dead mother. And the consequences don't end well. So what did I think of this film?
Satan is Lord, Satan is Lord.
So, it's interesting. I went to my local Cineworld, late night screening, and, it was half full, so it was pretty perfect for me. So I enjoyed it on that aspect. And I'd seen the trailer, obviously, but I didn't pay it too much mind. I'm not a big franchise person. I don't just see a logo from a franchise that I like and go, oh, I want to see that. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of the original Exorcist. It's one of the greatest films ever made, in my opinion. But still, I wasn't really that hyped for this movie. Going into the theatre, though, talking to a couple of the patrons there and things like that, I started to get excited. So literally, just before I sat down at the cinema, that's when the hype started to hit. I didn't look too much into the movie, so I don't know what the other reviews are like. I literally have only seen, I think, one of the trailers. So basically went in blind. And, well, you know what? I've got a lot to say about this film, and I've got to kind of keep it concise, so I'm going to try my hardest here. This film means a lot to me in some strange ways. I'm like I say, The Exorcist was one of the founding films of my kind of like young adolescence. And one of the gateway films into the horror genre in general, so it's got a big place in my heart. I'm also a massive fan of The Exorcist 3, because it's brilliant. And
Satan is Lord, Satan
but
is
again, I think it's pretty common knowledge that Exorcist 2 and the prequels and the series are, for the most part, garbage. And I agree with that. So going into Exorcist Believer, I was kind of like, okay. You know what? I'm going to let William Friedkin, who was the original director of The Exorcist, say it best.
What were you trying to make? Just a strong drama?
A realistic film about the inexplicable. That's what I set out to do, not to make a horror film. In fact, Blatty and I, Bill Blatty wrote The Exorcist, we never talked about a horror film other than to say we don't want this to have the properties of a horror film.
R.I.P. William Friedkin. You're the man. So I think really, for me, that kind of quote exemplifies the problem with The Exorcist Believer. Now, I think it starts with a really interesting premise. Essentially, you've got two families, one single dad and a single child. The other family, it's a more well-rounded family, mother, father, multiple children. They're God-fearing Christians. They go to church. And Victor doesn't with his daughter. He doesn't do anything like that. So it's interesting because their daughters are best friends, and one day they happen to go missing. And for the first half an hour of this movie, it's really kind of like engaging. It's slow burning, it takes its time, we're getting to know characters, there's interesting setups with the different backgrounds to each family. And then the daughters go missing. They go into the woods, and it's every parent's worst nightmare, I'm sure. They go into the woods and they don't come back. And for 3 whole days, the whole town is searching for them. They get the police involved. It's very procedural, very realistic. And it's a great setup for a movie. And I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And obviously, the children then come back after 3 days from nowhere, out of nowhere, and we don't know what's happened to them. And it's a mystery, and it's shocking, and it's a bit disturbing. They can't remember where they've been. And they've shown signs of damage. They've got cuts on them and nails pulled out and things like that. So it's like every parent's worst nightmare. And I think the original Exorcist did it best. It was just an everyday ordinary neighbourhood, an everyday street, an everyday house. And inside that house, there was just a family going through a crisis. And it just so happens that the crisis involves demonic possession. But other than that, it's played completely straight. And for the first half of this movie, it does exactly the same thing, which is brilliant. And then as soon as the girls go back home, so as soon as the girls go from the hospital, being interviewed by the police, to arriving back at their homes, the film just falls apart. And it's a Blumhouse production, so it starts to become very Blumhouse. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just ultimately ends up becoming very formulaic, very horror-esque, when I think The Exorcist always works better, or capture, in my opinion, capturing the original Exorcist mission brief, which is to keep it as realistic as possible, and it just so happens it involves some sort of supernatural element. They were doing it, and then they dropped the ball and just kind of doubled down and kept going and kept going. So as the film goes along towards the sort of second half of the film, it kind of just gets worse and worse. It gets more stereotypical. It just ends up like a normal, everyday kind of Blumhouseian horror movie that we've seen 100 times before. It does this really weird thing where it centres the kind of themes of the movie, as opposed to being about the families, about their crises, about these two conflicting families that need to come together to save their children. Instead of running with that theme, which is the narrative thrust of the whole movie, the film decides to make it more about working with others, letting everybody's beliefs be equalised. So, it like I say, the film doubles down. So it stops being about these two families, and then the two families bring other people involved. So there's multiple religious people from different religions coming together. So by the end, we get this weird, because of course this film ends in an exorcism, we get an exorcism with a round circle, a bunch of people, a bunch of grown adults who are from multiple different backgrounds, religious backgrounds. A Haitian woman, there's a Christian priest, there's this, there's that, the other's a nun there, and they're all from different backgrounds, and they're all basically holding hands and chanting, but they're all doing their own little ceremonies, different ceremonies, because they're all equally valid. And it becomes more about, if they all come together as mates, as friends, and they can all chant hard enough, then they're going to save the girls. I mean, who cares? Surely the film would have been better laser focusing on the family dynamics, their personal dramas, their personal struggles, coming to terms with what's going on in the real world, and working together, and keeping it very simple and focused. It would have made for a much better film, but they kind of just doubled down and overcomplicated things. And then the film ends up kind of giving this weird message about belief, and we all have different beliefs, but we can all work together. And, you know, ultimately, it's a very simplistic message, but also done in a very complicated manner. And then you're just left with the film going, I don't know what I just saw. Also, it's interesting to note that all the people that come for the exorcism, none of them are any experts in the religious field. I mean, apart from, I think, the Haiti... witch? I hate to use that term. I'm not familiar. Hopefully it's not insulting to anybody, but... the Haiti voodoo priestess, I don't know what she actually was, to be honest with you. I'm sorry if I'm getting that wrong. She was like, she knew what she was doing, but nobody else had any ideas what they were doing. And then there's a weird cameo by Ellen Burstyn. Now, in the trailer, it makes it look like she's a serious part of this movie, their narrative thrust, but she actually isn't. It's no more than a glorified cameo. She's in it for like 20 minutes, and then she's very unceremoniously taken out of the plot. And again, she provides nothing. She's not an expert in anything. She's not a priest or an exorcist or anything like that. But she feels like she can battle the demon. And she comes basically face to face. She just walks straight into the room and goes, "What's up?" And it's like, who are you? I know you're the mother from the original Exorcist, but again, so what? Like, why are you here? Why were all the other adults there, like, holding hands? Like, it doesn't make any sense when you think about the original Exorcist. It's just a very simple story. You know, it's detailed, there's layers to it, there's layers to the characters, there's all this stuff. But at the core of it, it's a very simple premise, very basic. And this film just kind of makes it so ludicrous, you know, so overblown, so overbloated, that it feels like inserting a kind of... that inserting an older character into the film will kind of make something happen. I don't know, like, she goes into the room and things go wrong, and then she's gone from the movie, and that's it. Why was she there? And I don't understand why anybody would seek her out, because she's just the mother who experienced something 40 years ago. And I think that's where I leave this movie. It's just halfway through, it doesn't know what to do with its own premise, and it kind of drops its own premise. It could have kept it very simple, and obviously, again, a longer film with more characterization, slower, very little horror. As William Friedkin said, The Exorcist isn't technically a horror film. That's not what he made. And I would hope that you would think that if they were carrying on the series, that they would have that in their minds. And instead of doubling down on it, you know, and just kind of creating a weird dynamic between the characters that kind of leave the film going, I don't know what the thrust of the film was actually meant to be. And just one last complaint I'm going to have. The main character is the father, Victor, played by actor Leslie Oldham. And there's a scene where he comes home from the hospital. He's been through a lot at this point. His daughter's been missing for days. He lost his wife. She's come back, but she's not right. He's in this house, and he's just sat there, and he's just looking at a book or something or other. And I don't know why we couldn't have a scene where he just breaks. In every day, in a normal situation, when your children have been missing, or your children have been hurt, or been through a trauma, and they're in the hospital, you're telling me that as a human being, as a parent, as a father, you're not going to break down and have a cry. Like, that would have been quite shocking. It would have been quite realistic. It would have made this film stop for 5 minutes. And we just never got that. We never got that level of realism that this film required. Again, it just opted to go for the more Blumhousian horror tropey kind of thing. And again, get all these other kind of strange characters together, a la It. Like, you know, like the Losers Club, but for adults. And that's where the film lost me. As I say, I can't recommend this movie. I don't recommend going to the cinema. I mean, if you're an Exorcist fan, you're going to be disappointed by this movie. There's some great bits at the beginning. The first half an hour, great acting, great cinematography. It's fine. And then it just goes off the rails and loses its own premise and loses sight of what it was trying to accomplish in the first place, in my opinion. So it's not a recommend for me. I'm really disappointed because, as I say, when the film started up, I was genuinely getting excited. And then it just kind of went down. So yeah, unfortunately for me, that's not a recommend. I don't recommend even going to see it at the cinema, if I'm honest with you. If it's free somewhere, or you find it later on TV and you're curious, maybe watch it. But you know, just be ready for a disappointment, really, unfortunately. But that's it for me. That's my review of The Exorcist Believer. Until next time, guys, stay safe, stay scared, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye.